Hello! Congratulations on coming to this video because you've chosen to study the most difficult poem in the AQA anthology. Now, one of the reasons this is the most difficult poem is the whole thing is filled with extended metaphors. So the first metaphor we need to look at is this idea of tissue being made of paper, but also a description of our skin. So this theme, if you like, acts as a kind of motif throughout the poem, where the human tissue is compared to paper in lots of different ways. Well, that would be great if that was all that was going on, but another extended metaphor is the idea of maps and what appears on the landscape. And that's also an extended metaphor that runs throughout the poem. We'll discover what that's about. And then finally, we have another extended metaphor, the architect, who obviously designs and builds the buildings, but who is also used to represent God, the, if you like, original architect of the whole world. So lots to think about in this poem. I'm actually going to give you 5 different interpretations. I'll start with the one that I least like and build up to the one that I like most. So you'll get an idea of how to prioritize these when you write about the poem. Well, the first interpretation I'm going to offer you is this, that the poem is partly an attack on globalization and capitalist economics. Globalization is the idea that products and brands are the same everywhere. Borders are disappearing as we all buy and aspire to have the same thing, and we're all economically linked to each other. In this reading, the paper in the poem is needed in order to alter things. So the poet either doesn't want some of the effect of globalization or desperately wants them. If we think of the most common thing made out of paper that has to do with economics, it is of course money. Money used to actually have to change hands, but now, as we'll see later in the poem, you can simply use a credit card anywhere in the world. You don't even need the currency of that country. There's a sense that the world is getting smaller. But if the world is getting smaller, the experience of people is getting larger and therefore more remote. So in this reading, the Quran becomes a metaphor for our own personal histories. So she imagines a kind of family history written in the back of the Quran or in the front, handed down through the generations, because people lived in one place. And they had real roots. This is contrasted to the modern world where we move to cities and indeed travel around the world. This is particularly relevant in terms of Imtiaz Dharker's context because her family moves from Pakistan to Scotland, and then she spends a good deal of her time also working in India. So as you can see, the world has become a smaller place, but families are split apart and roots are lost. The other thing that happens with this is that our attention disappears. It's now no longer focused on this image of family and our own history. Instead, our minds are taken up with a wider world. There's too much grabbing our attention, and with that, there's a sense of loss, that we've overlooked the fundamental things which are important, which is our shared history, our families. In this stanza, she sees the modern world as a kind of illusion. So if buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. In other words, she's saying that buildings do drift. We just don't feel that because they seem so solid. Cities seem so permanent. But actually what's permanent is the family and that history that I referred to and she refers to in her metaphor of the Quran. Then we have this image of them shifting on a sigh with the wind, as though to say that buildings are transient, civilizations are transient, but our shared beliefs and our shared histories last for thousands of years, much longer than the things that feel permanent to us. And of course there's a great irony here, because this history involves our lives, which are necessarily short. So in one sense, our lives are like paper, easily destroyed. However, there are some benefits of globalization. For example, the maps which divided us into different countries with artificial borders that set one nationality against another will disappear if we focus on our own tissue, our own skin, as being like everybody else's. And globalization does that. If we're all buying the same products and wanting the same things, then globalization becomes like the sun that shines through borders. Obviously, this reference to light shining through is designed to make us see this as a real positive force. There are also some mixed blessings of globalization. So she focuses on the fine slips from grocery shops. This adjective fine suggests that we get much better produce now in the globalized world. We can get vegetables all year round, fruit all year round, from every part of the world. These slips record how much was sold and what was paid by credit card. The introduction of the credit card is perhaps a negative here. Dharker almost implies that payment has now become too easy. Perhaps it's because we can get into debt much more quickly, and that's emphasized by the use of the word what rather than how much money. There's a sense that we're also paying something else, perhaps a loss of identity, a loss of what's special. If every country is like every other country, does that diminish the world? If we're all too much alike, has our variety gone? But the flip side of this is the effect it has on our sense of oneness with other people, our ability to relate to them. And so she imagines this as like daylight again that image of light being really positive, breaking through capitals. That's obviously a reference to capital letters on the paper, but it's also capitals in countries. And because it's the capitals, she's referring here to nationality. And if we can overcome our different nationalities, then, for example, we will welcome citizens of other countries. We'll all become much more similar and live in a much more harmonious world. And in this way, cities become the shapes that pride can make. So in this metaphor, she's obviously really critical of nationality, because patriotism, that love of our country, is connected to pride, which is a sinful emotion. We should be proud of other things, not of ourselves and thinking we are better than other people. So what began as an attack on globalization now seems to suggest that globalization is a solution, because it makes us more transparent to each other. In other words, we stop focusing on our differences and see how we're really the same. So the living tissue, which is the body, will raise a structure never meant to last. That's ironic, because our bodies don't last. However, through generation after generation, they'll last forever. And in this way, our skins, which are like paper, become smoothed and stroked. And such a structure, of course, doesn't have rough edges. Everything fits together well. And by becoming transparent like this, we will, as a society, be much more harmonious. Finally, that one-line stanza at the end points out how we have become each other. We have become one rather than divisible people. Globalization has saved us, and so she has turned not into our skin, but into your skin, directly addressing the reader and say, look, you're just like me. This will give us racial harmony. It will give us political harmony. It will lead to a world where nationalities don't define us, but celebrate everyone. In this interpretation, we'll see that the quatrains are arranged like verses, just as you'd find them in the Quran or the Bible. So she's partly writing for a Christian reader and showing them that the Quran is just like their own faith. Everything is written in verses like that. And this is partly a poem saying how faith itself is globalized. It's written in free verse, which we can link to the idea that through globalization, we're all free from prejudice. And then the final single line for emphasis we've looked at that carries home that message that you, the reader, have now worn the same skill as Dharker, the writer, to emphasize that point, how we are all, if you like, all of one body, all of one skin, despite its different colors. Okay, in order to make this easier to revise from, I'll give you my next interpretation as a separate video.